Get started on the Women in Blockchain panel. All right. So
we can share, don't worry.
I'm hoping that a lot of you stay for this panel because we definitely want to open this up for discussion. So first of all, how are you guys enjoying the conference? Good. Thank you again for coming out on a Sunday, on a holiday weekend. We really appreciate it. And I also want to say thank you for participating in this particular dialogue. So we are not going to solve this issue today, but we are going to talk about it. We're going to make it a little bit different than other perhaps women in blockchain discussions you've been in. First of all, we just want to share some personal stories, and then we're going to save some time at the end to open it up to discussion amongst you all. So start thinking about some questions and comments, all right? So you know what I love about blockchain is that this is a technology that since the internet, it is probably the greatest tool that democratizes accessibility to knowledge and wealth for all people. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the 2 billion unbanked and underbanked for the first time getting access into commerce. But last year, there was $550 billion of new wealth created. Only 5% of that was held by women, and probably even a lesser percentage of that held by persons of color. So I really want to talk about, why is that? This is all about peer-to-peer and the crowd and this new economy and this experiment, this social experiment, and we have hindsight of the internet. So this discussion is really about what is going on, is it a problem, and how can we solve it? So with that said, if you guys, first of all, wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and just your names and then a little bit about your company.
Okay. Should I start?
Please.
My name is, does the mic work?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. My name is Rahila Zafar, and I work for a company called Consensus. And my background is, I guess, a little bit maybe off the beaten path in terms of a person in tech. I worked in international development in Afghanistan and Pakistan for 5 years, and then I wrote 2 books, one called Arab Women Rising, funded by Wharton Business School, that focused primarily on women technologists in the Arab world, because unlike the US, in the Middle East, 60% of computer science majors are women, and they're founding companies and they're doing tremendous things. And I wrote a second book called The Internet of Women, which was funded by Cisco. And when I was doing field research for that, I met a lot of extraordinary women based in Afghanistan, Africa, and the Middle East that were starting blockchain companies. And I learned a lot about Ethereum, which I believe is the most sophisticated technology in blockchain. And being based in New York, I had the opportunity to meet Joseph Lubin, who's the founder of a company called Consensus, which is the largest blockchain studio. So I asked him, did you know that Dubai has picked blockchain as one of the technologies that they wanted to help accelerate? And he didn't know that. And he also didn't know that Saudi Arabia, for example, has Vision 2030, where similar to Dubai, they're aggressively investing in emerging technologies as they are realizing they need to transition out of being an oil economy, well, from an oil economy into like a real economy. And then I think one last point, which I think is interesting, is since I've been covering the Arab world for over a decade and traveling across the Arab world for over a decade, one extraordinary thing that I got a chance to see is the government's investing so much in IT education for youth and particularly women.
That's awesome. Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. My name is Emily Weil, and my background is in finance and technology and finance. I have an MBA from Columbia Business School, and I did some work in traditional finance, like equity research and venture capital. When it comes to technology, I've done a fair bit of creating and coding installations for brands like Chanel and various architects. I was introduced to blockchain through a venture capitalist friend of mine in New York, whom I was helping analyze companies, and She was a very early believer in the technology and was steadfast in her investing in it. And I was just so excited that here was this convergence of finance and technology and making things. I am now head of product for a company called UpChannel. We are pre-installing wallets on smartphones in emerging markets so that when someone in an emerging market buys a new phone, she powers it up, there's a crypto wallet right there, and no download is necessary. So I've been traveling around to conferences talking about this company, and I gotta say, one of the things I do like about this space is how diverse it is from a geographic perspective. It just kind of bowls me over that people all over the world are just so engaged, you know, from Russia and Singapore and Hong Kong. It's just there are these communities of fervent believers. There certainly aren't a lot of women at these conferences, but I do believe there's immense enthusiasm amongst a lot of the women I know, and I think 2018 might be a big year for us.
I'm Kelley Weaver. I'm the founder of a company called Melrose PR. We're based here in LA, PR and marketing agency. I launched the company in 2012, beginning of 2012, as much more consumer focused. So we represented restaurants and consumer products, things like that. And I did work with Kevin Winston, who probably a lot of you know, on the first Silicon Beach Fest. We helped out with some of the PR around that. But I was always very intimidated by technology in general and thought we'll never be a tech PR agency because I'm not very, considered myself to be non-technical and non-technical background, and found it quite intimidating. And an advisor, with all of the advent of all these amazing startups in the, on the west side in particular of LA, we kind of couldn't ignore the phenomenon that was happening at our doorstep. And this is about two and a half years ago. And so we were introduced to a company through an advisor called GEM that's based in Venice Beach, and they provide enterprise blockchain solutions. And they have an amazing sort of magnetic team, and we followed them around to all of these conferences and worked with them on their messaging and their strategy, and that's how we were introduced to blockchain technology. And myself and multiple members from my team, like, all just completely fell down the rabbit hole through our experience with GEM. And we were going to these conferences and saw an opportunity for, we were meeting all these incredible developers, talented individuals who were doing these incredible things, but weren't necessarily able to communicate their vision that clearly from a, you know, to a more consumer or mainstream audience. And so that's where we saw an opportunity. So we branded ourselves as blockchain PR, and through word of mouth and through, you know, the sort of rise of the market, we have become all blockchain, all crypto, and work with a number of different companies. And we're in, we have 7 women here in LA in our office, another 7 who work at various capacities remotely, and 80% of our company is women. So we're a bunch of women in blockchain for sure. And I think, I mean, marketing and PR in general there tend to be a lot of women. It's definitely been more difficult to recruit and hire since we've made this pivot and are exclusively blockchain. It seems to be intimidating, so I guess I'll leave that for some of the later discussion, but yeah.
Hi, my name is Susan O, and let's see, how did I get into blockchain? I met this woman in a women's washroom at a tech conference, and we're like, smoking outfit, like, what do you do? Oh, I have an AI platform. I work mostly in NLU and NLP and sentiment analysis. It was given to me by my tech team from 2 failed startups ago because I was a journalist for 25 years, and everyone knows I'm fairly blunt and very, very stringent about, 2 independent sources, which is the prism through which I look at the world, because I've been a journalist since I was 16. I had my first national on-air with CBC and went on to CNBC, Newsweek, and The Economist Intelligence Unit. And then when I started writing about technology, each of those companies would then turn around and ask me to consult for them for their messaging and PR and whatnot. And so being dragged deeper into the tech space has always been done by another female founder or funder who said, hey, you should work on this with me. And I'm like, yeah, you know what, that's really cool, because we like hanging out, and guys do it, so why don't we enlist like our favorite people and teach them and bring them along into our companies, right? So I met this woman in women's washroom. She's like, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I've got an AI platform. It's just, we use machine learning. It's a souped up bullshit detector. And I was like, what do you do? And she goes, I have a Bitcoin starter kit. I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. Can you teach my boyfriend? And then the more we hung out, she's like, you should work with me more because my intel nets some of my traders doing arbitrage between $25,000 to $30,000 a day if they're willing to stare at a screen for 12 hours. And I was like, no, I don't want anything to do with that, like baby buying Bitcoin bullshit. I just want to do AI. But she was persistent and kept sending me links and shared with me part of her learning curve. And then when I looked at the potential of democratizing the data to get better validated data, because bigger the data set, the better your machine learning learns. And then that's when it was just like, oh my God, what is this thing? And I've got to learn everything I can about it now. And so that's what I did for 3 or 4 months, was just basically I was a brain in a jar with hand extensions and just like reading everything that I could, going to meetups and talking to people and talking to other women about this. Not because, I worked most of my life, most of my career, whether it was in, journalism, advertising, marketing, or in film, I've been surrounded mostly by men because I'm kind of like a deep down in the trenches kind of girl. So I consider myself agnostic that way, but I could learn more from women quicker because they're so incredibly detailed. Right? They're in detail. They'll sit you down and run it through and make sure that you can do it from top to bottom, like 3 different, from top to bottom at least 3 times on your own before, you got that, right? So I kind of like that follow through. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Yeah. So I was like trying to figure out the AI and blockchain integration, which still, by the way, does not work because most of this shit doesn't. I started sharing what I was learning with people, and they could solve problems or started connecting people. And then so because of my volunteer work with that, I was asked to be chair of AI for Blockchain for Impact under the UNGA.
Thank you. So as you can see, we have a panel of these amazing women in blockchain. They're leaders and innovators, movers and shakers. In addition to that, I just want to say a quick note that when this conference was put together, there wasn't really an initiative at the beginning to say, we need to get powerful women to speak. We just, after the fact, we said we need to get powerful leaders and innovators to speak. And after the fact, we realized, wow, look at all of these incredible, amazing women that are in this space we're just lucky that have come to speak here. So I wanted to start off with a little bit of a positive note before I go to the darker side. Blockchain today. Where do you see blockchain being used that is actually helping women? Whether that's underbanked, refugees, local communities, do you see any of that?
Well, I think that the first use case of blockchain is actually investing and speculation, and I see tremendous potential for women in that arena. And it's interesting, I was reading a book about the history of speculation on the plane ride over here, and the 4th or 5th chapter was entitled Women Speculators. And it covered women speculators from the 1700s on, and in the 1920s there were women in America who couldn't vote, who were like creating investment groups. And I think that is the use case at this point for blockchain, is investing. I think that'll change pretty soon, but I think women are welcome. They're just not doing it just yet.
So I have a different perspective. I think I'm seeing tremendous use cases all around the world of women. Like, for example, in Dubai, we're putting the land registries onto a blockchain. We're doing, with Ethereum, they're doing tremendous work with refugees and identity on the blockchain. So I actually see the opposite of what she sees in terms of people actually building things that will make their lives better. One of the projects we're doing in Dubai is people being able to put their degrees onto a blockchain. So for example, if you were a refugee and you moved around to different schools, or just in general, if you're a citizen in Dubai and you want to get, the Smart Dubai government, you can get a degree in blockchain, and you have the ability to take courses from a variety of schools versus one and have that verified on a blockchain. So basically, every amazing thing that you can imagine. Like, I was just in touch with an incredible woman in Saudi Arabia where they're wanting to put a lot of artwork on the blockchain. And she's an amazing health researcher as well. They want to do these incredible use cases in diabetes to better understand the diabetes epidemic they have in Saudi Arabia. And they're able to gather data and understand it in ways that they have never been able to, thanks to blockchain. So it's just been fascinating to see these every single day.
Very cool.
Sure. You know, I feel like because it's still so early days, we're at like 2 to 3% adoption, and we're all trying to figure out and make it work. The entry barrier is like fairly low, and if you're willing to do the work and bring value to your teams, absolutely, it's probably one of the closest thing to a meritocracy that you're going to get in an industry. And so that's what I love about it, is like, you know, show me what you got. Code doesn't lie. The value that you bring doesn't lie. Your networks and the value that you bring to those, you know, cannot lie. And it's all consensually driven in a way, if you want to be thematic about it. But I really feel like it's, you know, it's very welcoming to women as a whole, especially in tech. And it's very well socialized and well intentioned. Because there's a lot of us who feel that, you know, things don't work as well as they should in this world for about how far along we are. And there's that sort of aspirational bent that excited my imagination far more than AI ever did. Right?
Awesome.
In terms of investing, I agree with you. I think that I'm not sure how to solve this, but I think that if there's more resources for women to sort of learn how to interact with cryptocurrencies, that maybe we'll get there, and that there, you know, I think the volatility maybe is scary. I'm guessing on that because I actually like the volatility. Yeah, exactly.
That's how they make their money, is the
So,
volatility.
but that's a personal thing. In terms of the women in blockchain and the opportunity, there are incredible. I think we're probably all part of like Slack groups and Telegram groups and you know, WhatsApp groups and I was part of an offsite event last weekend in New York, and there's women helping women is a huge phenomenon in this community, which is really remarkable and exciting. And I think it's because there's so much opportunity. It's still such early days, we forget that. And so there's just this, you know, this like, hey, come on, like there's jobs for you here. There's certainly, you know, money to be made, and there's you know, opportunities, and there's world-changing ideas, and like there's so many opportunities for women. And I think, you know, one of the things that like I'm actively trying to play a role in, and I think as women we are trying to just help each other, like opportunity sharing and you know, being as inclusive as possible. And the response that I've had since like joining these communities has been really overwhelmingly positive.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to add to that, even though I'm not just the moderator. I do want to say that, you know, I come from a corporate America background, and I'm going to be totally blunt with you. I've had some of the worst experiences working with women. I don't know why. I don't have the answers, but it's just, I've been stabbed in the back. The competition, the claws come out. I don't get it.
That's true.
It's unfortunate. I have to say that my experiences in the crypto community so far has been totally different. There has been this sense of collaboration, community, meritocracy, this newness, this brightness. How can we all work together? So I applaud all of the women in the space that are making that happen. I'm going to switch a little bit to the darker side as to maybe why more women are not involved, and maybe not just women, but other non-techies. So first of all, thank you, Kelley, for saying when you first got involved, you might have felt a little intimidated, because I certainly felt intimidated. I didn't even have a Facebook account last year, you know, and I remember my first event was at Stanford, February, and they were talking about zero proofs and this and that and Byzantine this, and I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And then they started bringing up, oh, it's a cryptographic distributed immutable ledger. And I was like, who in the world speaks like that? I don't know, can you guys raise your hands? Like, is that normal for most of you? Okay, well, it wasn't for me. I was like, I had to look up immutable, I had to look up ledger, I had to look up every single word. Now, I just want to ask you, so for me, my opinion is one of the biggest challenges that we face as a crypto community to engage others into our community is language barrier. I'm going to put that out there. What do you guys think are other barriers? Or do you agree with me, disagree? Do you see other things?
with regards to the language
Just in
barrier,
general, getting people involved, getting women and non-techies involved in the crypto space.
I mean, well, with regards to the language barrier, the one of the opportunities that we saw when we first entered the blockchain space around 2 years ago was that there was just all this jargon, technical jargon, and it almost was like this clique of, you know, if you're not using these words, then you might not know what's going on, and we felt like that we needed to do something about that. It needed to be more mainstream, and I think as a community, I think there has been improvement over the course of time in that direction, but it doesn't need to be so high level necessarily all of the time.
I've been, you know, coding in C++ and working with computers for many, many years, and yet I found the devices involved in like the crypto wallet and the just onboarding into crypto is intimidating for me, and I think that's true for a lot of people. Actually, one of the first person I met at this conference actually is a man who I'm going to keep his name anonymous since he asked me to do that, but he has set up mining machines for both of his teenage girls. And I was like, wow, you know, that's amazing. Like, actually, I've heard a lot about, you know, people sort of helping their friends and family learn about this and deal with the devices. I think, actually, that's very helpful.
What do you think I mean, you're from a really cool position in that you see in other countries, women are more engaged in
Yeah, I
technology.
mean, I think we should just be mindful of what are European and American issues versus, like, for example, in the Middle East, like I mentioned, 60% of computer science majors are women. The person that's leading the digital strategy for Dubai is a woman that has a PhD. The person that's leading the digitization strategy for Saudi Arabia, which is one of the largest budgets in the world, is a woman. So then when you go there, you suddenly see these female leaders in charge. They have female staff. There's so many female computer science majors. So it was really odd because I spent my first year at Consensus in the Middle East, and it was just like so normal and cool and welcoming to be a woman in tech. And then when I transitioned back to the US, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? It's a different experience that is just not as welcoming.
So I'm going to come to you because I know you've got something to say, Susan, but I just want to dive into that a little bit deeper because we might have these preconceptions of women here in the US where we're more advanced, equal rights, but you bring up a really interesting point. Why do you think that it's so different that women have it's more acceptable or the norm or more than the norm that they're in technology versus here?
Well, I can give one example. So Dr. Aisha, she's a woman that's head of Smart Dubai, that's overseeing the digitization strategy for the city of Dubai that has a 2020 mandate, and they want to be the first paperless city and the smartest city and, you know, basically every futuristic goal they have. So one of the things that she pointed out to me was way back in the 90s, the government realized then that they needed to not only invest in good infrastructure so they could have and keep up with innovation in technology, but they made sure that their schools had good IT curriculum and that they were starting at young ages, and that the government was very mindful that both men and women were equally encouraged to go and study these fields. So that was just a direct example of what she told me.
Very interesting. Susan, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So I'm Canadian. Oh, no. This is, hang on. Can you hear me?
Maybe just
Yeah, you can hear me, right? All right. So, you know, I was born in Korea and raised in Canada, and I presumed, and I'd worked for, you know, American companies for a lot of my career, so I presumed that, you know, the culture would be very similar. It took me about a full 2 years to get acclimated, and I moved to Chicago, like you know, and I was actually really horrified at the culture, at the sexist culture and the misogyny that was just implicit in all the movies, all the advertising. It was, to me, really insane, some of the stuff that they could get away with that wouldn't be okay in Canada because people would just turn off of it. as being, why are all the female characters hysterical and needing to be, rescued by men? Why are some of the languages that just presume that, like, I'm stupid or I wouldn't be interested in something that's technical or detailed, right? And there are all those sort of like unchecked biases that you would notice if you weren't born in that culture and come into it, right? But I don't find gender. I find that America in general has a deplorable state of gender equality, and there's some unchecked biases that are allowed to run rampant, especially with people of color and different genders.
Wow, this is very enlightening, really, really enlightening. So I want, yeah, thank you. So we have about 12, 13 minutes, and I want to open this up to a broader discussion. This is community, after all. And we've heard some really amazing things about how other governments are incentivizing their people to be more open to both genders, or that we're so behind in the United States culturally. So I want to open it up to all of you. And here's one thing I want to frame it. Please don't be afraid of using the right or wrong word. Let's not get caught up in the grammar. Let's get caught up in what we mean from our heart. And so we really do want to hear, you've got some amazing leaders that will take your words back into their communities. And this is all about learning from each other. Nobody has the right or wrong answer or the answer. So with that said, I'd like to ask, do you think that government should have a role in the United States in helping become more inclusive to women and people and diversity in general? Yes. Yeah. Do you think that there's a role for blockchain to make that happen? You're what?
No one's an expert. If they tell you they're an expert, it's not real.
Where do you think some of the solutions are? I'd love to hear from some of the men in the room. Like, where do you even think this is a problem in the U.S.? Yes, back there.
So I was on I went to the PhD program in mathematics over here at UCLA, and came back, I'm a software engineer at Google, so I came back to talk to some of the PhD candidates about getting a job at Google, and the recruiter who had organized the event, as soon as it was over, I had emailed him and was like, I was shocked by the fact that everyone in the room was like white male. Maybe there was one woman. There's certainly no minorities. And, it's like within the company there's all this talk around diversity and inclusion, but, to like, those points about like, if there's not, that diversity in the pipeline, right? Or we're only looking to the top universities that, only, give the positions to, the people who, have a legacy or whatever, like, the opportunities seem to only be there for, white males generally. So it's sort of a pipeline problem. It's like, I don't know how to solve it, but it's definitely a problem, and it's apparent, and I'm excited about the fact that I see, more talk about it in the corporate world as well as, in this community in particular, in these emerging sort of technologies.
So I appreciate that comment. I'm going to ask a quick question, and then I'm going to go to your comment. How many of you in here actually think that there is a problem? Okay. How many of you in here want to see a change? How many of you in here would be willing in your ICO chat rooms to say, what is your strategy to attract women and diversity? To know. So your comment in the back.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of go off of that because I used to work in recruiting, and specifically in university recruiting for a top tech company. And as a recruiter, it was really frustrating because actually you asked a question about does the government have a sort of play or hand? And they actually, in creating laws, employment laws, they need to be a little bit more progressive because recruiters can't actually see if it's male or female, which is good, right? But it's also bad at the same time because we're held to diversity numbers and we're expected to hire people from certain ethnic backgrounds or gender backgrounds, but we can't actually see who any of these people are, but then we're slapped on the hand if we don't hire enough of those people. But we don't know who they are coming in the gate. So that's number one, that's an issue. So this law is kind of in place to protect people, but at the same time it's actually hurting, like at the very bottom level, how we're able to get people in the door. And then number two, going back to your point about these universities, so similarly, I interviewed with another large kind of tech company, and they specifically told me that they don't hire engineers out of schools that aren't the top 20 engineering universities in the country. And if you know anything about the demographic of some of those different schools and universities, you know specifically like where they get their students from originally. Obviously, these universities have these quote-unquote initiatives to bring students in that have these diverse backgrounds. But it's all really, I think, at the end of the day, a lot of it's just for show. And I do think that there are, state schools that are wonderful that, students that come from, lower socioeconomic backgrounds can actually afford to go to and pay off when they're done and they get jobs. Women who are, they have a child when they're 20 years old and then they decide to go back and actually get that bachelor's degree in engineering. They get a master's degree and they have to work and raise their kids. So I think some of those schools like need to have a lens on them because they're actually institutions that are producing smart people and women and people with different walks of life that are going to be able to come to the table and have a lot to bring and have maybe a different worldview because you can get kind of isolated in these institutions and not have, some of that thought diversity at the table. So coming actually from a background where I saw that happen firsthand is extremely frustrating. And then to kind of go to another tech company and see that everybody has that same idea, I think women need to start having these conversations. And women, a lot of women work in HR. Kind of like we were talking about PR, like a lot of women work in HR and recruiting as well. And so I think, women that are in these spaces need to start to kind of put their foot down and say, like, let's take a look at some other places. So I think that's where women can kind of come to the table as well.
Great, thank you. Yes, Jeff.
Yes. So, look, governments and institutions, enterprises that have 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years of suppressing women, suppressing people of color. It's perfectly fine for governments and institutions to now support them, to make up for some of that balance, because there's a lot of people that have started at a disadvantage. Now, that being said, a government or a institution trying to fix the problem of racism or sexism doesn't really work, or using the blockchain doesn't really work, because it's a Band-Aid. It doesn't address the root problem. And the root problem is that mothers and fathers teach their little boys that it's okay to be sexist. And parents in neighborhoods teach their children that it's okay to be racist. And really, when we talk about sexism and racism, we need to directly address the problem, which is at the individual level. Individuals have bad beliefs and bad thoughts. And the blockchain can give reputation, and we can rate people, we can put identity, and we can label someone on the blockchain as a bad person, don't do business with them, but it doesn't affect that their root core hasn't been raised correctly. So in the end, what we need is a better philosophy, a better spirituality, to make people really identify who they are and have open communications with people that they label as the other, and realize that we're all kind of one.
Thanks, yeah. So I wish we could keep going on with this discussion. I wanted to save the last few minutes to see if any of you had some follow-up comments to what's being said here.
I completely agree with you. The only way to change a culture, right, is to create a new one or a different way. And the only way that you can actually even seed any of the ideas or adoption of technology is to first enlist them in your vision of what you see as problems, right? And so you make it a universal problem. You enlist people. And so do it with kindness, do it with bluntness. Don't be a jerk about it, but say this is a problem and that we can all get behind and build consensus, right? In everything that you do. Let everything that you do be an expression of who you are, and enlist. Don't fight, enlist.
I mean, I think that as there's more and more awareness around the fact that there is an issue, the solution kind of, things are going to get better. Like I've noticed, for example, with conferences, I've been all over the world to various different blockchain conferences, and it's primarily men at a lot of these, and there's been it's come to a head recently, at least in a lot of the women's discussion groups that I'm a part of, where it's like we're not going to show up unless they allow like other women to come. And there's been events like this where there's an effort, there was discounted tickets for women, and there's like conference organizers who are making an active effort to make sure that there is some gender balance on the panels. And I think as there's more and more discussion about like this needs to happen, this needs to change, and people are making a conscious effort to do so. And I think that, there's a lot of admirable men in the space who are doing a lot to help this. So it's not like all bad. I feel like it's getting better because these conversations are continuing to be had. There's been a lot of like women in blockchain panels at the various different conferences, but ultimately it's the more we talk about it and the more we say, hey, it's not intimidating. There's all these positions. There's HR roles, there's PR roles, there's whatever. There's all different opportunities for all different genders, all different ethnicities here in blockchain. The more inclusive it's going to get over time. I think historically it's been, a lot of very young white males, and because it's a brand new technology, and they were the first adopters, and that's great. More power to them. But now it's like we need to bring more and more people in.
I guess I really agree with you that it's going to happen organically to a certain extent also. Women control about 80% of consumer spending, and it's not like they're going to be left behind in this world of this type of economy. It is going to happen. I think we can definitely do these things that we're sort of talking about that can speed things up, but I think over time there will be an influx of women. Again, I think over the next year I can sort of sense this coming.
Awesome.
Well, I think on a positive note, what I'm excited about in terms of blockchain is the technology. I don't care about the price of Bitcoin or Ether or any of that. And if you look at the disruption it's going to cause in healthcare and education and a lot of key areas, the perspective of women is so critical in developing the types of products of the future.
So I want to say thank you to the panel. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Thank you. I also want to say thank you to all of you for participating, and I feel really sad that it was such a short time to communicate with you all, but I want to throw out the challenge that we are all in this amazing experiment together. Right? And it's not just LA, it's not just Silicon Valley. We think we're all in the United States and that's what it is, but it's not. It's global. And it's all different kinds of people, and gender, and race, and religion. And it's for the first time ever, it's up to us to make this world what we want it to be. So I would love to leave a challenge with all of you as we participate and become innovators, or we purchase cryptocurrency, or whatever it is that we do, that we become really mindful of this new world that we are all creating together. And to really reach out to our fellow man, woman, whatever, and make this that beautiful world that I think we all envision it to be. I also wanted to say one last thing. Through the UCLA Blockchain Lab and the Los Angeles Blockchain Lab, we are launching a Women in Blockchain vertical. But that does mean we want to be inclusive. We want this to be men too. Please join us and help us in these discussions. And again, thank you so much.